Hi, my name is Fidan. Welcome to Studio Visit, curated by me. In this series, I visit artists in their studio, invite industry professionals, and travel for art fairs. In today's episode, I am interviewing Trevor King. He is New York City-based artist, and his work explores memory, materiality, endurance of human spirit. Through sculpture and installation, Trevor King creates works that reflects on themes of time, mortality, and intimate relationship between place and history. He is originally from Butler, Pennsylvania. He received his BFA from Slippery Rock University, and he also studied sculpture and intermedia in Poznan, Poland, and earned his MFA from Stamps School of Art Design at the University of Michigan in 2015. In our visit to his studio, we spoke about his artistic process, his experiences in various artist residencies, and how his background continues to shape his approach to making. Trevor's thoughtful engagement with materials and storytelling offers compelling perspective on contemporary art practice. I cannot wait for you to watch the whole video and leave your questions or feedback. Thank you so much.
This is my newest work in progress. I think this piece will probably be titled Bad Aura, or maybe it might be titled The Palm Reader. And I have been making these kind of larger than life figurative pieces for probably 3 years. They each take several months to kind of get to this stage. So, this is maybe the 7th of these works, and they all are sort of rooted in just trying to make something universal that is about a sense of either alienation or feeling lost, or to make a conversation about circumstance, fate, purpose. So I think of them each individual character is sort of hopefully a little bit it has an archetypal quality, but also is nameless. They're not a historic figure or a known human entity. They're just these kind of beings that have been plucked from some time and dropped into our world and don't really know what to do with that. They have awkward proportions. They're not realistic, but I hope they're, while not being anatomically realistic, I hope that they are very humanistic in their kind of consciousness and expression.
Are they part of a series?
Well, kind of. A few of them are now at a sculpture park outside of Buffalo. And the 3 of those I sort of consider one series, or a grouping that I want to keep together. But as the series progresses, I definitely make decisions based off of the last one that I made. I keep trying to push the envelope with what I'm doing, and my work is sort of operating at different scales. This is the most time intensive and complex, and this is sort of where I always put my energy, where I kind of want it to be out of reach or a little bit crazy. And when I'm making these, it feels very out of control. I'm chasing the work and things are happening that I'm not necessarily planning. So with this very glossy surface, that is a material I've been working with for a while, but it is totally different than the previous figurative pieces, where there are sort of components of this guy, human man. He doesn't have any anything on the surface. There's no glaze. It's just the clay and the way that the kiln affected, basically the surface, the skin of it. So that figure looks sort of burned. He is just an awkward naked man. And so this guy is going in a different direction, where he's studying his palm and considering his fate.
Is this ceramics and you add the glaze or
Yes, this is a ceramic form. The pieces are built essentially like coil pots or pinch pots, where they I start on the bottom and just work my way up. So there's always kind of an exquisite corpse quality that comes with that. But the surface is a plastic. I think in some ways it mimics glaze, but it does give me a lot more control with the color and the ability to kind of rework it, where typically with clay, you build the thing, you fire it, and then you put glaze on it, put it in the kiln again, and then it's done. Whatever happened, and that's it. Kind of the fact that it tricks the eye a little bit. You might think that it's glaze, but it's not. And then just the power to use these vivid colors is really exciting for me and very different than often what you can get with glaze.
They're very bright, yeah.
Yeah.
I love this mix over here.
Oh, thank you. This is one of these weird pieces where the kind of idea for it came as like more of a, like not an epiphany, but like it came to me in a moment. This is the maquette over here where I was sort of playing with that idea.
There's supposed to be a phone and it's missing.
Oh.
Is this also your piece?
Yeah, this is a new one also. This is kind of a model and maybe an idea for something bigger. But the work is essentially like a knockoff Calder, where I've like turned the Calder into an antenna and a speaker. This is one of those artists that I've always loved, and there's like so much elegance materially in the work. Like I'm from a kind of post-industrial area. I grew up with like people working on cars, not exactly like looking at artwork.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, like the first time I would encounter something like a Calder, I'd think about like the practical purpose for it. And it would be like, oh, that like must be like an antenna or like some kind of mechanism. And so I've like tried to make a literal demonstration of that.
Oh, wow.
You know, it has some, I was talking to a friend about this piece, and it's like, it does something. You know, it has some kind of strange magic.
So where does this get this frequency?
This object right here is a transducer. So it's like emitting sound through the plywood and through the sculpture. You know, I can click around. Different stations work better than others. I love working with sound. I feel like playing music was kind of my entry point to visual art. And I feel like sound is so just like emotionally effective. Yeah. And also just so sensory.
Do you have a studio routine?
I have like a task in mind, and I like to kind of leave something a little bit unfinished the day before so that I have like a quick way of getting into the workflow. And I also am like kind of controlling about how things are laid out in space. So I do a lot of like reshuffling of the shelves and moving things around. Part of what's unique here anyway is that my studio is shared with so many people, and it's also kind of like connected to a fabrication job that I do. So a lot of times I'm working in the studio like after I've done a day of work for another artist. So it's just very fluid. I feel like the studio is sort of like just an extension of my making, but I'm always sort of working on something or trying to process some sort of idea. My art making is extremely continuous, you know, whether I'm here or not. And yeah, this is my sketchbook. I have some drawings, but for the most part, what's in here is just like lists. You know, this is sort of like where I'm keeping track of everything, and there's always too many ideas than I can accomplish. So it's just a matter of like.
How long time you spend in the studio?
I work pretty slowly, so I like to be working for at least like 3 hours. You know, sort of. If there's anything less than that, I feel like I'm not really like gonna accomplish much. Some days I'll just come in and I'll make like 50 of those, like the Apple component, you know, where it's just very like peaceful and I'm just working with clay, kind of spacing out. And then other days are more intensive and creative where I'm like really shaping forms. So it just depends on where my mood is, you know. We have a little like dining area up here we can hang out at.
What am I curious about artists? So this is like part of personal. One of them was inspired from this book, Daily Rituals. So I wanted to know, what's your like studio routine, which you explained.
Yeah.
But in general, do you have a daily routine?
Well, something I wanted to like circle back to about that is I feel like most of my work, and this ties into your question about painting and drawing, I think that the essential thing for making art is like observation. One of my favorite teaching phrases is notice what you notice. So like when something stands out to you, why is that? Or what makes sort of something that you're seeing poetic or emotional. So I just feel that like being an artist in general, I'm always kind of expecting moments where I see something, I go, oh, that's actually like meaningful and overlooked. And I need to like sketch that down in my notebook and try to make a piece about it.
Very close to this question is, do you have inspiration ritual? Like we all know, artists go through sometimes that they don't create anything, or you can't create. You don't have inspiration. Like, do you have some kind of ritual that you get yourself back to track?
Just trying to find ways of feeling exhilarated is very important to me. I actually really enjoy mountain biking, just to like be out in nature and have some intense exercise. It's really important for me to like clear my mind.
I read a little bit in your the link you sent me in the other interview. You said, I think your grandfather was artist and artistic.
Well, sort of.
Okay, my question is basically, do you think when you make art, does it get you closer to your grandfather, in large to your ancestors?
Yes, definitely. My grandfather was a truck driver. Started drawing because I was studying art. And he was, I think, trying to like make sense of what I was doing in both like a genuine curiosity kind of way and like a pragmatic, how are you going to earn an income sort of way. So he started drawing objects he'd see on the Antiques Roadshow and tell me, be like, hey, Trevor, this was worth like $1,000. Like, you got to copy it. If you make that same thing, you could have $1,000. So it was sort of like that project was this great like back and forth between us over several years. And it was a conversation, He'd make some drawings, I'd make something, I'd be like, he'd laugh about it because his doodles were sort of not naive, but they were just unselfconscious, And then I'd make something that looked just like his drawings, and he'd be like, no, it's supposed to be like symmetrical, for example. But it's also a conversation about what objects are valuable or how art making can introduce like new values into your life experience. In the United States, or at least like where I grew up in Butler, Pennsylvania, there weren't a lot of artists around, or at least professional artists, and or making sort of culturally thought of as this thing that was like on the margins or that weirdos did or something. I don't think that's true. And I think we're all involved with sort of telling stories of who we are, and that artists are like an antidote to a lot of negative things in our world. I mean, I chose art making like as a profession, not based on I have some kind of talent for this. I was never like an excellent drawer or anything like that. I was just really curious about what artists did. Felt like it was like a dignified sort of pursuit to spend your life doing.
Well, that's a very good way to put it.
Probably affects my work in a lot of ways, where like I don't have a central motif or like a singular style. I'm also sort of like professionally just involved in art, and that brings me a lot of satisfaction.
And how did you make a decision that I'm going to art school?
My dad worked in a steel mill. Like I was kind of growing up as a kid in the 90s and then early 2000s, when like deindustrialization had kind of peaked. And so the community was like so destabilized and frustrated, and there's so much cynicism around like the professional world and work, that I was just determined to do something else, and something that I felt was like very meaningful. And I knew some people that played music and were in bands, and so that was kind of like my gateway into the arts. And I guess when I was going to college, I was still sort of like had no plan for my future, but I thought I would just go get into the art department, and the folks in the art department like took me in, and it was a great fit for me. And through a series of miraculous events, I've been able to continue doing this since then. So something that was important for me was that my undergrad was like a very interdisciplinary program. A lot of students were going there to become art teachers, but if you were serious, you could pursue it in a different way. And you could also jump around between mediums, but the program had a exchange with a university in Poland. So I got to spend a semester in Poland, and then I was like dropped into this city that had art everywhere, and the academy was like such an intimidating place because these kids were like drawing the figure since they could walk, you know.
Which city were you in?
Poznan.
Oh, wow. Never heard that city.
It's like halfway between Berlin and Warsaw.
Oh,
I think it's maybe like the fifth or
Okay,
sixth
okay.
largest city in Poland, so it's like a university town.
Oh, nice.
But just to be in a place where art was taken seriously and respected was definitely very affecting for me. And I kind of came back from there like very determined to go to grad school and continue making.
How did the grad school went?
It was good. It was frustrating. I went to the University of Michigan, where I was able to continue doing like a bunch of different stuff, but I was doing some performance pieces and sound-based works and video works, but at the same time, I had like a personal connection to the ceramic studio technician. And so even though it wasn't really like my focus when I went to grad school, by the end, it was like I was doing most of my work in clay. That sort of propelled me, you know, towards when we moved to New York. It was like every time I've moved, I ended up having a job in a ceramic studio, either like making glazes or firing kilns, you know, because I had that skill set. It was sort of a natural thing. And clay has just become more and more a central part of my practice.
So ceramics follow you everywhere.
Yeah, totally.
Basically.
Totally. Even if I'm reluctant about it sometimes.
What are the emotions you go through when you make art?
Oh,
I'm sure it changed day to day and it changed to piece.
yeah.
Do you think it's healing?
Just being an artist in general makes me feel very free, you know? And I think that my lifestyle allows that too, where I'm constantly like pursuing this almost impossible thing. I definitely go through an emotional roller coaster with works, you know, where I like to take big swings in my work and big risks, and sometimes like stuff turns out, it ends up, you know, kind of far from what I imagined.
Yeah.
And that can be disturbing, you know, but at the same time, it can really be a moment to learn a lot about yourself. And I think part of the job of like every artist is to like try to sort out what you're an expert in.
Yeah.
You know, and so like these figures of like I feel like I'm an expert in feeling sort of self-conscious sometimes or shy or awkward, and so that's part of like what I'm putting into the work. For me, the most satisfying thing is like to have made an artwork that creates a record of something, and that can be, you know, like what I have in the studio right now is pretty expressive and creative, but on the other end of the spectrum, some of my works are like very observational. You know, I have like these pieces where they're just like, I have a video work with my old professor, and it's like a 20-minute portrait of him and his farm and his studio, and you see these pots that he was making in the 70s that are like covered with dust, and they look like as old as time, you know, like they always existed. And in the discussion, he's like talking about pottery and ideas and how that material is kind of a way of examining time. He talks about making pots like a calendar, you know? And so for me, it's very meaningful that I was able to like produce a sort of record of his personality and ideas, you know? And that's now like something that is sort of etched into the turning of our world, even in a small way, even if like only 100 people have ever seen it. It's like at least I said like, hey, this is interesting and like should be noted, you know.
Do you have this on your website?
Yeah.
I'll watch it.
Yeah, I could send it to you.
Oh wow. Is there any advice from your BFA or MFA like professors that you still apply to your artwork?
Sometimes I think a good teacher, they just help you like recognize like the skills you have or the qualities you have.
Yeah.
You know, like I had a professor tell me that I was like a sponge, you know, which was nice. I don't think I am very spongy anymore, but I think at the time I was good at observing and taking information in, you know. But your question made me think about this thing where in like 2015, I was extremely fortunate and was able to do an internship with the sculptor Anthony Gormley in London. he was like the most generous person ever. I showed up there and worked for a day, and then like the next day he came up and was like, hey, I like looked at every work on your website. Like really studied what I was doing, and I was like a child, you know. I was like I was in my 20s, but still felt like so naive. I think artists, you know, you do all these different things and you experiment and you try different ideas, and you can't know what's going to be effective until you like see other people react to it. And so for us, I think the job is to like see what's working in your work and then lean into that or follow that.
What
Advice
would
would be
you advise someone who just start doing art, like they are at the beginning of their art career? What would you advise?
art making should always be kind of like an act of discovery, or something that you're doing as a way of researching, or a way of like engaging with, you know, the field you're interested in. So if your stuff feels too much like just production, then there's probably something not working there. That would be basically my advice.
I wanted to ask, like, research in general, research materials that, okay, I worked with photo, now I'm switching to ceramics, or is it search internally that's, okay, the medium will get me somewhere?
Both, all of the above. For instance, in one of the beautiful things about ceramics is that it's such a historically relevant medium. You can go to any major museum and see pots from human history. And I think because of that, and I felt this way when I was first getting into clay, there was like a tendency towards making something that looked like it was, you know, coming out of a burned down house or something, you know, that looked like rustic in a way, right? Because you wanted to like, or I wanted to imbue it with a sense of history, you know. So at some point I had to kind of recalculate, think like, well, why am I making these like wood-fired pots that are sort of artificially old?
Yeah.
You know, what do I really want my pieces to say about time? So like a lot of those works that are based on my grandfather's drawings, they're painted, so they always look like soft clay. And I think of that as this like reflection on like a time-based idea, where they look like a kind of unfinished still life in the studio. You know, when a clay object is still fresh and full of possibility, and you might expect it to change or like slump over or collapse. And, you know, it's more like more humanistic in that way. It also, those pots I think raise questions like, why is this? Why isn't it finished? Why isn't it glazed?
What are you excited for next? Like, what's the next project, or is there anything specific at 2026 you are very excited about?
It's hard for me to talk about hypothetical projects in too much detail. There are some things that I want to try with like that sound sculpture that we were looking at. I'm sort of excited about the possibility of expanding that into a larger installation. And I think over the last like 12 to 18 months, I've been kind of in this studio routine of making like individual discrete objects, you know, that are in a series, but it's kind of like a lot of singular pieces. And what I'm working on right now is more of like putting together an exhibition, you know, or like a total experience of work. It's just like a slightly richer kind of making process, you know, where everything, all the works kind of affect each other and communicate in different ways. More of a narrative experience.
So your wife is also an artist.
Yeah.
How is it living with another artist? How do you inspire each other, I would say?
Oh, that's. I mean, I wish I would have said
What's
that.
her medium, by the way?
She works in drawing and painting. I think that her medium really is like symbols and images. For a long time, she was mostly just working with like charcoal and graphite. Her background is in neuroscience, so a lot of her work, I think, was at one point about like cognition and vision, but also like vision and symbolism.
Yeah.
One of the most rewarding parts of like our relationship and sharing this life together as artists is like we both, I think, recognize that like we can just invent whatever reality we want to live in, you know, to some degree. Being an artist isn't based on some kind of goal. It's like every day, you know, we can decide what to prioritize. And so just to be understood, I think, is really,
Yeah, to be understood is very powerful.
yeah.
So, what is your question to my next artist?
Something that I like to ask artist friends in the studio is like, if you had every resource in the world, what would your like dream artwork be? Or what would like the ultimate artwork be to create if you had the backing or the venue for it or whatever? I just think that's kind of an interesting thing to learn about.
Yeah, I think people don't realize like how space actually limits you. When you have just one desk to work on, or you have a whole place to work on,
Yeah.
it's two different medium.
I think a lot of times limitations like really help the creative process, but so do kind of dreams, right? And having something that's a bit out of reach.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
This was amazing.
Thank you.
I enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully, whoever watched, they will enjoy it.
Yeah,
This is the beginning of it, and like, I feel like thank you for taking this leap with me.
of course.